Crypto Caesar Capital. Hope you're well. It's the 4th of February 2024, and I'm going to do a video on Bitcoin dominance. And I'll tell you why I'm going to do a video on Bitcoin dominance, because despite having done 2 or 3 maybe previous videos on Bitcoin dominance and tweeting quite a lot about it over the years, some people just still don't get it. And some people are still calling now an altcoin season, and it's just not going to happen. Okay, altcoin season is going to come. It will come. It's going to come this year. The start of it will come this year, but it's not going to happen yet. And too many people have been calling an alt season, okay, basically for the last year, calling an alt season back when Bitcoin dominance was at 40%, calling an alt season when Bitcoin dominance was at 47%, and so on and so forth. Absolutely retarded when you actually think about it, okay? And when you actually look at the cycle of cryptocurrency and how it works, excuse me, you'll quickly find that it's very cyclical. And by looking at the history, you can kind of work out what's going to happen in the present or the future, okay? And that's all we've got to go on, all right? And traditionally speaking, there are some things that have to be right for a good recipe for an alt season. And they are, Bitcoin dominance needs to be really high, okay? And then at the point Bitcoin starts to surpass its previous all-time high, Bitcoin dominance then starts falling off a cliff. And when Bitcoin dominance starts to fall off a cliff, that's when you have the perfect recipe for an alt season. And that's when alts really, really start to pump. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this rule, because some altcoins will just pump and pump and pump and do really well, and they don't care about anything else that's going on in the market. But generally speaking, 90% of altcoins aren't really going to move parabolically, not up, just parabolically, yeah, until you have that recipe for an alt season. And I'll show you the recipe for an alt season by going back and looking at what's happened in the past. So firstly, Bitcoin dominance has to be super high for the alt season to start, really. So let's go back to 2016. Bitcoin dominance was 97% at that point. 97% before it started falling off its cliff, okay? And it was at 97%, and then it absolutely fell off a cliff over a period from January 2017, over a year period, really, down from 97% to 35% in January 2018. So over a 12-month period, it fell off a cliff. It lost a huge amount in dominance. But what was happening at that point? Well, Bitcoin was trending up and alts were going absolutely parabolic. Perfect recipe for an alt season. Bitcoin had surpassed its all-time high, and off the altcoins went, and the dominance went down, and up they went. Okay, so that was the first significant alt season that we've seen in cryptocurrency. The next was, of course, the previous cycle. Okay, and where was Bitcoin dominance at the point of which we started to have an alt season? Excuse me. Bitcoin dominance was here. It was at 74% around 28th of December 2020. So just coming into 2021, end of 2020, Bitcoin dominance was at 74%. Then it started its descent from 74% down to 39%, falling off this huge cliff. What was Bitcoin doing at that point? Number one, Bitcoin was just surpassing its all-time high, its previous all-time high, sorry. And the altcoins started to push and started to move when Bitcoin dominance dropped off the cliff from 74% down to about 39% or so. So let's go back and look at what Bitcoin was doing at that point. So let's look at the first altcoin cycle, if we could call it that. So, oops. So around about sort of, this January time in 2017, Bitcoin dominance is about 96, 97% or so. So January 2017, where were we in the cycle? in January of 2017. Very interesting. Maybe not so, because this is all very cyclical. In January of 2017, we were at the midpoint of the cycle, and usually at the midpoint of the cycle, Bitcoin starts to surpass its all-time high. And that's the point when it starts to surpass its previous all-time high. It starts to go parabolic. That is when the altcoin market starts to move heavy with Bitcoin, outperforming Bitcoin. But what's Bitcoin dominance doing around about sort of January, February 2017? January, February 2017, we are here. Okay, this is January, February 2017. What happens in January, February 2017? Boom, it drops off a cliff. What happens to the altcoins? The altcoins go up. What happens to Bitcoin? Bitcoin goes up, and the altcoins follow it and outperform it. Okay, pretty straightforward stuff. Okay, then we've got the next cycle where we were our peak of 74%. Where was Bitcoin trending or trading at that point? Around about December of 2020 to January of 2021, when Bitcoin dominance had peaked and started to decline heavily. Where were we around that point of January 2021? Let's have a look. January, December, January, here we are. This is December, January 2021. We were right on the midpoint. We were here. We were trending, surpassing the all-time high of previous all-time high of Bitcoin, trending upwards. This is around about December, January 2021. And exactly what was Bitcoin dominance doing at that point? It had peaked out and it was dropping. What was the altcoin market doing? The altcoin market was going up. What was Bitcoin doing? Bitcoin was going up. The altcoins then, or most or some of the altcoins then started to outperform Bitcoin. Bitcoin then drops down to its, well, Bitcoin dominance drops down to its low of about 39% or so. And that was around about April, May of 2021, where arguably speaking, that was the peak of the altcoin market, although Bitcoin did have another high around about the November 2021 point. Some altcoins printed further all-time highs like Solana, Ethereum at that point. But generally speaking, the majority of the altcoin market had actually peaked out around about this point where Bitcoin found a low at 39%. So from that, we can take a few things, right? Number one, Bitcoin dominance needs to be very high. Number two, we need to be well into the bull cycle before Bitcoin dominance starts to drop and altcoins start to rally. And number three, we need to be close to or, you know, on the midpoint of the cycle of Bitcoin. And the midpoint is, of course, is halfway between the lows of the previous low to the next low in the Bitcoin cycle on the 4-year cycle. And that is the point. The midpoint is where Bitcoin tends to reach or surpass its previous all-time high. And that's when the Bitcoin dominance starts to drop off a cliff. And that's when we have this classic alt season. So here we are in February of 2024, where Bitcoin dominance is at 52%. I've said for, I don't know, a long time now, probably since around about sort of November, maybe sort of January 2023, that Bitcoin dominance needs to be around about the 58% mark. It's an obvious area because we've got this area of support here back in May 2019, I think, and then this area of support in January 2020, which was then breached during the last alt season. And I think that Bitcoin just wants to probably come up and tap that area, or maybe get a little bit above it and see where it goes. So we are now at around about 52%. There's a possibility we might come back down and test this area here. Alts might get a breather. You know, Bitcoin dominance might come down to 48% or so. It's quite possible. But generally speaking, I think that we're going to kind of trend up towards this area of 58% into 2024. Maybe, you know, it very much depends what Bitcoin wants to do. If we follow the classic 4-year cycle, we're likely to find our peak in dominance around about sort of between September and December of 2024, and around September of 2024, September, December 24, that's when Bitcoin dominance will start to likely fall off a cliff, and that's when the altcoins will really start to go parabolic. Now, just sort of looking at this from a practical and realistic point of view, to get to 58%, we're at 52.5 now, is not that far really to get there, okay? And to get up to there, you're talking 10.67%, which isn't much. I mean, we might go a little bit higher to 60%. So, you know, 14% to the upside. It's not very far really for Bitcoin to go. And an interesting point, if you want to look at this a little bit more meticulously, is let's take a look and see what happened at the point of, or the midpoint, if you could call it that, the previous cycle for Bitcoin, when Bitcoin was trending up at 73%, when it had peaked out on its dominance at 73, 74%. Let's have a look at the move that Bitcoin did at that point between, you know, its parabolic move here, the Bitcoin dominance move from 58% all the way up to 73%. Okay, that's quite a big move, guys. It went from here, it's 57%, all the way up to 28%. Okay, and that's a big move for dominance. That's a really big move in quite a short period of time. So let's map it out here. So from September 2020 through to 28th of December, so end of December 2020. So this period here, so from September through to January 2021, what was the price of Bitcoin doing? Where was it in the cycle? And what caused it to rally? What caused Bitcoin dominance to rally that much to the upside? So to, you know, 26% odd. What caused it to move significantly from September 2020 through to January 2021, or the beginning of January 2021? So let's have a look. So September through to the end of December 2020, we'll go back on our chart. Get rid of these so it's a bit easier for everybody to see. So September, let's map it out. September 2020 through to the end of December 2020. Let's have a look at that. A bit more detail. Get rid of that. There. So this is September 2020. This is December, the end, 28th of December 2020. What was Bitcoin doing at this point? Bitcoin was rallying hard to the upside. This was its break. Okay, this was its move to the upside. This is where it surpassed its previous all-time high. Real parabolic move to the upside, surpassing its all-time high. And what Bitcoin did at that moment, okay, is it pretty much sucked the air out of the room. Altcoins most altcoins weren't really rallying hard at that point. Some of them might have been gaining some traction on their US dollar pairings, but generally speaking, on their Bitcoin pairings for sure, they were either trending down hard, or on their US dollar pairings, they might have been trending up a little bit or pretty much going sideways. But what Bitcoin was doing is it was rallying hard. It was going to breach its all-time high. It was sucking the air out of the room. It literally went from the move that it took from here to here was a 200% move to the upside. Okay, I'm not saying that's going to happen this time, but just, you know, to look at this realistically and see what Bitcoin was doing at that point. From September 2020 to 28th of December 2020, it was moving hard to the upside, and it surpassed its all-time high. and then continued to make further all-time highs. So in between those dates, September 2020 to December 2020, Bitcoin was rallying hard. It was sucking the air out of the room. What was Bitcoin dominance doing? Bitcoin dominance was shooting to the upside because everyone was piling into Bitcoin at that point. Everyone was getting full FOMO. Everyone was getting really excited. Everyone was buying Bitcoin, and it was pushing the price of Bitcoin to the upside. It was pushing the market cap of Bitcoin to the upside because the price was increasing, and it was pushing dominance to the upside. Most altcoins were either going sideways or trending up slightly on their US dollar pairings. Now, if we look at the situation that we have now, we've got Bitcoin dominance at 52%. And all I'm suggesting is that in this move that Bitcoin's going to have at some point, okay, whether it's before the halving or after the halving or around the midpoint, all I'm suggesting is that Bitcoin dominance is going to drive up towards 58%. Maybe it might get to 60%, okay? And that's only a 14% move to the upside from where we are now. What happened in the previous cycle when that happened? It did a 25% move to the upside. So realistically speaking, it's not far for Bitcoin dominance to go. But once it finds that peak of around about 59, 60%, once it finds that peak, then it's going to really drive down hard to the low side, and alts are going to really run hard parabolically. But my point is this: it's not going to quite happen yet because Bitcoin dominance needs to be higher, and we need to be a little bit further on in the cycle for this to happen. Now, there is a potential argument here that we could have a left translated cycle. And what a left translated cycle means, and I'll explain this in very, very briefly because essentially it would take me too much time in this video to explain to you fully, but you can go back and look at my previous videos on the 4-year cycle to work out what I'm talking about. But generally speaking, Bitcoin works in 4-year cycles. And that means that it trends from peak to peak 4 years and bottom to bottom 4 years. It's got nothing to do with the halving. It's measured in time, peak to peak 4 years, bottom to bottom 4 years. But what could happen this cycle is that we could essentially not follow the 4-year cycle that we have always previously followed, okay? And we could peak out sooner. Now, a 4-year cycle theorist would say that we're probably going to peak out in sort of about 4 years from the last peak. Okay, let's measure that out. So the last peak was around about here, November 2021, right? So 208 bars takes us to 4 years. So we're going to kind of peak out around about the October, November, December 2025 point, which means that Bitcoin would kind of do this, and then it would come down and find its market low at around about October to December 2026. But if we get a left translated cycle, that means that we're not going to follow this traditional 4 years up on the 208 bars and then come down and then find our low in October 2026. We will peak out earlier, okay? And that means that the chances are we would start to surpass the all-time high just around the halving point, maybe just after it, certainly before the midpoint, because we always generally surpass or start tapping on the door of the previous all-time high at the midpoint of the cycle. But we would certainly start going parabolic before the midpoint, and we would peak out sooner, which would mean that the bear market rally would come sooner in time. That would mean, generally speaking, that we would peak out sooner, and the altcoins would also peak out sooner. But that doesn't make any difference, okay, to Bitcoin dominance, okay, because Bitcoin is still going to have that full move to the upside, to the 58, 60% mark in my view, but that might just come sooner rather than around, because if we're following a 4-year cycle, we're going to probably find that Bitcoin dominance finds its peak in sort of October to December 2024, then it starts falling off a cliff. But if we don't follow the 4-year cycle and we're going for a left translated cycle, that means that we start to peak out on the dominance sooner than October 2024, maybe around the halving, maybe in the summer of 2024, and then we start to move heavy to the downside, and that's when the altcoins will go fully parabolic to the upside. So hopefully, I know I've gone on a little bit here. It's difficult to explain, but I hope that you've found some source of education in this video. But generally speaking, there are a few rules from history that we can go by, because Bitcoin and crypto is very cyclical. The rules are essentially these: that Bitcoin dominance needs to be pretty high or very high before we have an altcoin season. Bitcoin needs to be close to or surpassing its all-time high before the dominance starts to fall off a cliff, because we know that from looking at the charts here back in January 2017, here in December of 2020. So likelihood is, in my view, we get to 58, 60%, and then it's at that point that the altcoin season will begin. Of course, there are going to be some exceptions. Some altcoins have been doing very well lately, which is excellent. Some of the altcoins that we picked for our group in our research documents have done extremely well. I mean, some of them are up 250, 300%. They completely outperform Bitcoin. But 90% of altcoins are going to follow this Bitcoin dominance cycle. And for me, the obvious area to peak out on a Bitcoin dominance is around about the 58 to 60% mark. If you want to join the group, please reach out to us either on Twitter or have a look at our website. We've got lots of different membership tiers. The most popular membership tier is only $499 per month. Sorry, per year, not per month. Everyone in the group is super happy with the service that we provide. So please reach out to me on Twitter or send me an email via the website. The link is in the description. There we are. Have a good day, and I shall speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.